The War of 1812. Who won? Some random thoughts. Back in 2022, I embarked on a project to chronicle the War of 1812, month by month, from beginning to end. This proved to be a voyage of discovery, and I learned a lot. I also came to understand how important this forgotten war was in the development of North America as we know it today. But what most people want to know is, who won? The parties involved were Canada, Great Britain, the United States, and the First Nations/Native American tribes. I think one of the reasons the War of 1812 is both forgotten and confusing is that each combatant won something, except for the native warriors. Some random thoughts. 1. Canada won. The British and their Canadian allies defeated or stalled successive American invasions in 1812, 13, and 14, so Canada remained British, and I would argue that General Brock's victory at Detroit was the first step towards Canada becoming its own country in 1867. I think Isaac Brock has some claim to be considered the father of Canada. 2. Great Britain won. Great Britain won as Napoleon lost. For the British, the North American War was a distraction, a nuisance. They were broke and tired of war, so they chose to make peace and move on. 3. The United States won. The Americans may not have secured any Canadian territory, but the removal of British support for the native tribes allowed them to expand westwards. The peace treaty failed to address the issues of impressment and the British boarding of American ships, which were the ostensible causes of the war. But with the end of Napoleon, these things became non-issues. Besides, after their one-sided victory over the British at New Orleans, it was hard for Americans to think they'd lost. 4. The First Nations/Native Americans lost. Most writers on the war agree on this point. After the British failed to insist on a Native American state as a buffer to U.S. expansion, Tecumseh's dream of First Peoples autonomy died, as he had died on the banks of the Thames River. Such are my thoughts, but I reached out to my old friend Shawn, a lifelong student of the war, to find out who he thought won. This is what he sent me. Shawn, the big question, if we want to play the game of who won, is what the American goals were, as they were the ones that declared war. The ostensible reason was impressment and national pride, but the British repealed the orders. Warren here. Shawn is referring to the British Orders in Council, which allowed for the search and seizure of American ships and the impressing of American seamen for service in the Royal Navy. But the British repealed the orders, and so the war machine could have been stopped. But it wasn't. Why not? The British support of the tribes was seen as hindering westward expansion. I believe that ending British support was a war goal, and it succeeded. The British essentially threw the natives under the terms of the peace treaty and left them open to further American expansion. Another goal was national pride and respect. The Americans wanted to be taken seriously, and after the war, they were. Throughout the 19th century, the British, the greatest empire in the world, was very reluctant to engage in direct armed conflict with the U.S., another win for the Americans. Incidentally, contrary to American myth, the British did not try to undo the revolution. Their raids were punitive and not for conquest, and that included the Lake Champlain campaign. Would the British have liked to gain territory? Absolutely, but it was never a primary goal. This brings us to the next question. Canada. Going back to the American attempt to capture Quebec during the Revolutionary War, the U.S. always had covetous eyes on what is Canada, and based on talks of artificial borders and the 51st state, some still do. Many Americans thought/think that they should have the northern part of the continent. Remember Manifest Destiny? In light of later wars with the natives, Mexico, and Spain, the War of 1812 was just the beginning of American imperialism. The capture of Canada was the real goal and prize. Even in the peace negotiations, the Americans suggested that the British surrender Canada to avoid any future conflict. That alone indicates American war aims. Who won the war? All but the indigenous people have some claim to say that they did. I would argue, though, that in light of the failure of the Americans to capture Canada, and that is where, by far, the U.S. invested their military strength, the British and what became Canada were the ultimate winners. My thoughts for what they're worth. Meanwhile, elbows up. Shawn. But what do you think, dear listeners? Who won the War of 1812? Please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Let's start a discussion on the war and, like Shawn, share our knowledge and wisdom with like-minded history buffs. If this is your first visit to 1812 channel, my name is Warren and I'm your host. I'm not a historian, nor am I an expert on the War of 1812. Instead, I'm a student wishing to learn about the conflict. For the past 3 years, I have covered the events of the war month by month. I currently have over 70 videos available on my channel. Why not check them out today? And when the barrage lifts, cheers! And a big thank you to Shawn. Thanks, buddy.